PowerShell scripting, custom type extensions. This is going to kind of be a sequel to the previous nugget where we talked about custom formatting views because we're going to use a lot of the same techniques to achieve a very different result. In this nugget, we're going to talk about PowerShell's Extensible Type System, or ETS. It's a way for PowerShell to take an object that the computer has produced and extend that object's functionality. So I'll show you how the ETS works, but the cool part about this nugget is I'm going to show you how to extend types on your own. We'll do a couple of cool different things. This one's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, we are literally picking up where I left off in the previous nugget where we were playing with formatting views because these custom type extensions work really similarly. Let's start by talking about what it is they do and what they're for. If you run a command like get process and you pipe it to get member, when you look at this member list, you'll notice that you've got several different things that are called a property. Now, I'm just trying to scroll to the top of the list here. I have properties, but I also have alias properties. Now, this alias property is part of PowerShell's extensible type system. When you dig deep into the .NET framework and you find the system.diagnostics.process object, it does not have a handles property. It doesn't have a name property either. Instead of name, it has a process name property. Well, the problem is that most objects have a name property. This object is actually inconsistent in that it doesn't have a name property, that it uses process name instead. So Microsoft, as they were developing PowerShell, thought, this is kind of a pain in the neck. Administrators don't really deal with the .NET framework every day. They might not really know where to go for documentation. And by being inconsistent, we're making this stuff a lot harder to use. So what if we extend the type, right? So that the type is the description of this kind of object, this type of object. So what if we extend the type to include some other things? And we'll just have PowerShell tack these onto the object as the object comes into PowerShell. So every time PowerShell sees a system.diagnostics.process, it adds all of these alias properties. The original ones are still there. Look, if we scroll down too far, LMNOP process name, right? So the original property process name is still there, but we can also get to it with name, which is an alias property, because that makes this more consistent with the other things in the shell. And you can see there's other alias properties that maybe just make things more convenient. Instead of having to type non-page system memory size, we can just type npm because PowerShell adds this alias property. Well, there's other things in here too. Did I just scroll past one? Yep, there's a note property. PowerShell has added this, indicating that the noun name for this is process. It probably uses that for some internal goofiness. And then at the bottom, we've got some script properties. These ones are especially cool. A script property, when you access it, actually executes code. You can see here that Microsoft, the PowerShell team, has created a company script property. So when I try to access the company property, this code gets executed. And what it appears to be doing is saying that we know a process object has deeply embedded in it somewhere the name of the company that made the process, that made the actual executable. And it's got a description, and it's got a file version, and it's got a path, and all this other stuff. But it's hard to get to. You have to get the actual object, and you have to go to its main module, .file version. You have to go through all this steps. So because we think that's information people are going to want to commonly get to, we're going to shortcut that for them. So this isn't referring just to a property, but it's actually executing some code. CPU does the same thing. You can't get to the CPU information easily. You have to go to the process, total processor time, total seconds. Well, we're going to make that easier by making it a script property. There's also things called property sets. This is well, I guess the name says it all. It's a set of properties. Look how this works. If I do get process, and I select PS resources, that's another whole set of properties. Now, these are things I could already get to. They're not new, but they're bundled together this way. So Microsoft said, we're going to create this thing that lets you quickly get to just the properties that have to do with resources. Because a process object has got so many, like 67 or 68 different properties. We're going to provide an easy way with a property set for you to get to just these things. So look, at the end of the day, all of this gets added on at runtime, and it's part of PowerShell's, as I said, extensible type system. So where's that live? Well, let's go to PowerShell's installation folder. Oops, that's my home folder, PS Home. That's PowerShell's folder. And we've got this types.ps1xml. Let's look at that in Notepad. Types.ps1, tab complete. Why bother typing at all? Let's do a quick find for a system.diagnostics.process, since that's the thing we were just looking at. And that's a process module. Close, not quite there. There we are. So we have a section in here that describes a type. The name of that type is system.diagnostics.process, and here are the members that we are going to add. Let's go through just a few of these to compare what we just looked at. Here's a property set called PS Resources. What properties does that reference? Well, all of these. These are all the properties contained in that set. So add this as a property, and if someone tries to look at it, give them all this information. Cool. Alias properties, here's one. So we're creating an alias property called name, and it references the original process name. That's pretty easy. And there's a few alias properties. Then we get down to script property. Script property, what's the name of it going to be? Well, it's going to be path. Okay, when someone tries to get this property, when they try to read this property, what code do you want me to execute? $this is kind of like $_ everywhere else in PowerShell. It refers to the current instance of the object. So I'm going to go to its main module .filename. And that's what all these script properties are doing. Well, so we can make our own type extensions. I'm going to start by grabbing just this entire type. Now this is a big one, so we're going to trim it down a little bit. Whee! All right, copy. I'm going to open up the ISE, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to paste that in. And you'll notice the color coding is a little bit whack. That's because the ISE thinks this is a PowerShell script. It thinks it's a PS1. So I'm going to automatically, right away, save this as... And you'll notice where I'm putting it, where it's defaulting to. This is my module directory. I'm not going to save it there for right now. I'm going to call it test.ps1xml in the root of my C drive. And now that it knows it's a PS1 XML file, the color coding gets cleaned up. All right. I'm going to take out this note property and all but one of the script properties, just so I have one of those as kind of a reference. I'm going to take out all but one of the alias properties. Whoa, too much scrolling. There's the end of an alias property. I'm not going to play with any property sets, I don't think. These take up a lot of room, and I'm trying to get all this to fit on a screen. Let's take out everything else. We'll just play with those two. So I've got the type, the name of the type, the members I'm going to add, and I'm adding an alias property and a script property. Okay, makes sense so far? Now this isn't complete. I need to go back into my XML file because there's always these starting lines, and I need to make sure that my XML is complete. So I'm going to paste this into the top of the file, and we'll delete Microsoft's copyright notice because, we copied it. I'm going to make sure all my indentation stays nice and pretty and neat. And then I need to make sure I close that outer types. Now remember what I said in the previous module, or the previous nugget, when we were modifying this module to add the formatting view. You need to kind of assume that this XML is case sensitive because in some versions of PowerShell it is. Version 3 and later it's less picky. If you assume it's picky, then you'll be safe no matter what. Okay, so we've got a basic template to work with here. Let's go into my module. I need, if you remember in the previous nugget, which I really hope you watched, I modified the top function in this, the first one, and I gave the output object a custom type name, and that's what we built our formatting view for. Well, copy. That's what I'm going to add something to my custom type extension on. So I'm going to put that type name in here. So now I'm going to be adding things to that type of object. Now in here, this has a computer name. Let's make an alias property for computer name. That's an easy one. So the referenced member name is the original member name, and we're going to call this host. All right, you'll see what that turns into. What else can we do on here? OS version, SP version, OS build, blah de blah blah blah. Let's look at the output of that. Let's what was that called? That was get system info, system details, computer name, localhost. And I got because I have a custom formatting view from the previous nugget and it's hiding some of the information. Let's take a look at it all. Let's make a version of the BIOS serial that doesn't have the hyphens, just for fun. So here in the script block, we're going to call this normalized BIOS serial. And it's going to be this dot, what did we call the property? BIOS serial. This dot BIOS serial, replace all instances of a dash with nothing. I'm going to save that file, drop down here to the command line. Now, this module is already in memory. This PowerShell instance is already up and running. So none of the stuff I just put into that XML file is in memory. I need to load it. Update type data, test.ps1xml. No error messages. That's good. That means it worked. So let's run get system details again. And I'm going to pipe it to format list star so we can see everything. Now I have a normalized BIOS serial that doesn't have any dashes in it. And I have a host that contains the same information as computer name. And if we pipe that to get member, you'll see that host shows up as an alias property and normalized BIOS serial shows up as a script property. So right now this only works if I manually load that type extension into memory. So let's go into my module, manifest. I'm going to close this, open. Let's see, I need to go in my documents folder, Windows PowerShell, modules, OS tools. Now here in my OS tools folder, if you remember again from the previous nugget, I have my script, and that's what's actually on the screen over here, right? That's the functions, that's the code. I've got this formatting file that I created, and I've got this manifest, and the manifest is what PowerShell loads. It's like an inventory. Right now the manifest says load this script and these views. I want to extend the manifest so that it also loads my custom type extensions. So before I do that, I need to make sure that my custom type extensions live in the modules folder. So we'll do a save as, documents, Windows PowerShell, modules, OS tools, and I can name this anything I want to, but just to keep things organized, I'm going to call it OS tools types. Call it anything you want to, doesn't matter. All right, now let's open that manifest. Root module version, let's see. I'm looking for, see we produced this with a command before, but since it's already produced, I don't want to have to do it again. I'm just going to come edit this thing manually. Here's where it loads the formatting, and here is where it would load the type files. So we just need to modify this to be the same. OS tools underscore types dot ps1xml. Yeah? Fun. So we've saved that. Let's open up a new shell instance. Get system details, computer name, localhost. That should force PowerShell to have to load the module that contains that command. And in doing so, it should load the formatting and the type extension all at the same time. So now let's run it again and pipe it to get member so I can see that it actually did load all that information. So this is pretty cool stuff. Now, adding type extensions to your own objects might seem a little silly. I mean, I'm producing the object right here. If I wanted it to have a host property, I could just add it right here. If I wanted to add a different version of the BIOS serial number, I could just do it right here. Type extensions become handy when you want to modify some of the stuff that's producing objects where you aren't producing the object. So you don't have any control over the code. You just need to modify the thing afterwards. Now to do this, I'm going to kind of show you something a little arbitrary, mainly because I want to focus on the process and the technique for extending a type, and I want to focus a little bit less on whatever goofy, crazy thing you kids might want to do to that type. So I'm going to start, let's just start with this. Let's do a file save as. I'm going to put this back in C test.ps1xml, just so we can play with something separately. And I think the type I want to extend is going to be system.string. Now there's a couple of things you can add in addition to alias properties and so forth. Now alias property I'm not gonna fuss with here. Strings only have one property. It's called length. Let's take a look at a string. S, get member. Only has one property on here, length. Not really much point in adding an alias to that. Length is easy to remember. So instead, let's add a script property, and I want to also add something called a script method. So I'm going to need to find what a script method looks like, and I'm going to go back to the Microsoft file here to do that, because all good copying and pasting comes from here. Oh, there's one. Script method. Let's just grab that, copy, and paste. Okay. So in the script property, what could we do? Let's put is UNC. So my goal here is to have this return a true or a false if the contents of the string look like a universal naming convention path. So to do that, I'm going to use PowerShell's match operator. Now look, writing regular expressions can be tricky. I am not going to try and come up with the ultimate regex for UNCs. I'm just going to try and keep this relatively simple so we can focus on what this XML is doing instead. So let's say start of string, backslash, backslash, one or more word characters, followed by, no, you know what, let's just leave it there. I don't want to get too complicated. It's not about writing regular expressions. Now for me, the difference between a script property and a script method is this. A script property does not have to go do anything on the network. It's just it's a calculation. I don't have to go communicate with anything. I'm not doing anything. I'm just manipulating the data I already have. A method, on the other hand, does something. It takes some actions. I realize that's a fuzzy line, and it's a fuzzy line that's only in my head. There's no official difference between a property and a method. Properties contain a value, and they can be written and read. But in this case, I'm just creating a property that can only deliver information. It can only be read. You can only get things out of it. So the line is fuzzy, I will admit. I just want to show you how to do a property and a method. So let's put this one is available. So I'm going to have a script method called is available. And what this is going to do is ping test connection $this minus quiet. Now let me just test that real quick. Test connection localhost minus quiet. Hello. True. Okay, so that's going to return true or false. Let's save this. Now look at what this winds up doing. We'll load it into memory. Update type data, test.ps1xml. No errors. Thank goodness. I always get nervous when I do these things like real quick like that it's going to explode, but it didn't. Let's put localhost into a string. Let's look at that in getMember. You can see I have this script method is available. X.is available. True. It pinged it. Y equals not online. Y dot is available. I'm hoping this is good news. I feel like there's dead air. I should tell a joke. So a man and a duck walk in. Oh, no, false. Perfect. So that works. Now let's see if y is, y is a UNC. Now that's a property, so I don't have to follow it with the parentheses, and it says false. All right, so z equals whack whack server whack something. Z is a UNC, true, or at least it matches the regular expression that I provided, which I admit is not the best regular expression in the world, but this isn't about writing regular expressions. So this is a really, really cool set of techniques. If there's some functionality that you just wish a particular type had, you can add it essentially by writing a little script and then just attaching that to that type every single time. Here are the downsides. If I write a script that actually uses these two things and then give that script to someone who doesn't have all of this type extension, then obviously it won't work because a system.string on their system isn't going to look the same. That's why I'll typically only do these things as part of a module. So if I have a module that is relying on that functionality, I can make sure that the type extension lives in that module and have a manifest that loads that type extension as part of that module so that when I distribute the module and distribute the code, I'm also distributing the type extensions that it needs to work with. So now you know about PowerShell's ETS, the extensible type system. You know how it works and how it can be used to extend object functionality. And you've also seen how Microsoft uses it to kind of make objects a little bit more consistent than they natively would be. But you also saw how to extend types on your own, adding functionality to them that originally did not exist. And whether you choose to do that for your own objects or to add functionality to some of the things that are already in PowerShell is totally up to you. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.